I've definitely dabbled on this subject in the past, but why are Americans so bad at geography? And it's not just geography, it's definitely history. It's definitely with like something like flag identification, something as little as that. In fact, I partly think that one of the reasons why I have a successful channel on YouTube is just because I can identify flags and just say the flag's name out loud. Like, if I go outside and show 10 people the flag of Brazil, for instance, I'm going to predict maybe half will know and recognize that that is Brazil. And I think even that is a little bit of a that's a pretty generous number, that 50% of the 10 people I find outside would be able to recognize the flag of Brazil. I think it really, really depends. So part of the reason, like I just said, why I think I have a successful channel is just I'm able to see the flag, say, boom, Brazil is blah, 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 blah. I either explain whether it's a meme post or a country ball post or it's a YouTube short, TikTok reaction, whatever that is. Just saying the name of the country, I think, helps people be able to understand a bit more. So Americans are really bad at this. And funny enough, one of the reasons why America is so bad, a lot of Americans are so bad at geography, is because of our geography. Our geography alone, which you've probably know this, I'm probably preaching the choir, a lot of people probably already have figured this part out. Because the U.S. is so isolated from the rest of the world, I believe that they don't even care. The education system does not care at all about teaching people. The education system in the U.S. does not care about teaching Americans geography. I didn't take my first geography class until college, and I had to elect that. I didn't even need to take that class. I chose it because I was interested, and this is like my freshman year of college. And that was the first time I'd ever learned about it. I can't imagine being a history teacher and not teaching like geography with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I remember learning about England and France, and maybe there was like a map with it once, like a little, like up in the corner somewhere, like a small diagram showing a map of Europe at that time. But the fact that the teacher didn't like show us that more, or show us like what was going on, because geography is so intertwined with history. I mean, you can't even talk about them hand in hand. You can't talk about one without the other in a way. And that's part of the reason why I show so many maps in my own videos, because I feel like I have to show you where this is located. What are the two, if we're talking about two different countries, I need to show you exactly where both are located, why certain countries have, whether they have shared history or a rivalry or whatever. I'm going to show you on a map. It's because either they're right next to each other or they both have this, mutual bond over a certain body of water, for instance. You know what I mean? Like going back to the France and England example. I mean, a lot of the reason why the British were so powerful throughout history is because of that English Channel. And they knew that if they just built enough boats and kept everyone from their island, then they were going to be safe. And then that rolls over to colonization. Why they were able to colonize 25% of the globe is because they were already really great at building ships. They were some of the best ship makers because they knew that that was their number one strategy to keep themselves safe on the British Isles. So one of the reasons why Americans are so bad at geography is just because they don't teach us geography, because they don't. It's not as important to Americans as it is to, I think, the rest of the world. Especially when you look at like where Americans vacation to, it's always inside of America. It's always, I mean, I can walk outside, to use my walk outside example, and start talking to random people in public, which I've always wanted to make videos like that. Maybe I will one day. But if I use that example and I walk outside, I bet you most people I talk to, it depends. We're in California. If I was in a different state, if I was like in my birth state of Alabama, and if I was in some small town, I guarantee you like 9 out of 10 people would tell me that they've never left the country. Actually, I reviewed maps about that. I've reviewed maps about how many Americans have responded with them have never leaving the country. There's a certain number that's popping into my head. Why do I think that like 61% of Americans have never left the U.S.? For some reason, that's the figure that, and I don't remember the figure right now. I'll figure that out later, but it's around half, I think. So geography isn't quite as important to Americans in general, and maybe that reflects on the education system, why the education system doesn't feel like they need to teach geography. And in turn, this also lines up with the history part of this video's question. Why don't Americans know much about history? It's because all they teach us is American history. I mean, I've ranted about this so many times in my videos about I feel like I got the same crash course about American history like 3 or 4 times between kindergarten and 12th grade. Like, it was just review, it felt like. Like, yeah, we did cover World War II, but of course that was a World War II from the perspective of America. And it's like, yeah, that's an interesting aspect of it, but there was so much else going on than just that. One thing I will never not be upset about, I'll never forgive my personal education experience, is we only really talked about like the age of colonization from the perspective of American colonization and the British. Yeah, of course, the French came up a couple times, maybe the Spanish like once or twice, but I love that period of history. Like, the age of colonization is so interesting to me, but we barely covered it. We covered like the Mayflower and the Pilgrims, and then boom, American independence. We jump into that, the American Revolutionary War. So there's just so much that was left out. And this isn't exactly the video topic that I wanted to talk about, but man, history is such an important subject for people to learn. And I feel very blessed to be able to teach as many people on YouTube, even people close to me that stumble upon my YouTube channel. Like, maybe I met somebody in real life and I tell them I do YouTube, and then they stumble upon my channel, and then they come back to me maybe the next time I see them, and they tell me, these things that they learned from watching my videos. I'm like, oh my God, that's incredible. Like, I know that I've done that before in the past, but to see that I have helped teach people that are in my real life, I'm like, oh wow, that's awesome. So part of the reason why I like to talk about these topics is it's just like something that I wanted to talk about and I wanted to learn more about as a kid. I remember asking my dad a lot of questions, like history questions, my grandma as well, because I was just curious, like, what was going on? But they only knew so much. It's not like their job was history, so we couldn't dive too deeply into it, but it definitely like kept my curiosity going. It kept my interested. Unfortunately, I fell into one of my own traps where I had the opportunity to do like European history in college, but I took recent U.S. history, which I got to admit, I do like recent U.S. history. I do find that stuff entertaining. Like, if I'm gonna focus on U.S. history, then I'm gonna focus on 1900s and after, because I feel like I've been driven home the origin story of the U.S. so many times as a kid. It's like I don't want to learn that anymore. Like, okay, that's fine. I'm just like not that interested. So, our geographical location. We have 2 neighbors here at the U.S. Here in the U.S. We've got Canada. We got Mexico. That's about it. So, I feel like a big thing that schools teach is, as long as we know those 2 facts, I don't even think they really care about if is it Mexico that's north or is it Canada that's south. I don't know if they care about distinguishing which side which is. And again, I would love to ask, like, my younger brother or my some of my younger cousins, like, what they remember learning in terms of history and geography, because maybe they've had a different experience. But because we all went to school in California, I'm sure we probably shared the overall a similar criteria, a similar curriculum. I hate saying that word. That word is so hard. So there's a geography thing that goes on. When I travel to Europe, and this is why traveling is so important, that I always advise people to travel, because you just learn so much about the world, whether it's how different countries do different things or different aspects about language. When I travel, it's like, oh, you guys need to know geography because it's so much. Almost anywhere else in the world, besides like North America and probably Oceania, Australia, like, there are direct clashes and there are direct signs of the different, your neighbors, your languages, the cultures. You see that stuff every day. It's a lot easier to see that stuff in Europe, for example. Even if you're coming from London, even if you're like from the UK, like you are going to meet a lot more people from other countries than I'd argue here in LA. I can't speak for New York. New York would be the one example I could think of that maybe has a good amount of people from all over the world. But London is incredible. And London is incredible when how many people you just run into all the time that are like just visiting. I think that's the thing. The people that you meet around the world in maybe New York, a lot of those people have moved here. They're not just visiting on a vacation. Sometimes they are visiting on a vacation, but a lot of those people are now living here. Whereas, I mean, I was on the underground and I met like 2 Swedish ladies, and I've talked about this before. I've met somebody from Kazakhstan, and you just run into people all the time that are just from different countries because they're maybe going to school or they're just visiting or now they're living in London. So you have to know a little bit more. Like I feel like it's a part of the everyday life for you to understand who's next to you. From the London perspective, understand that France is right there. Why maybe you're going to run into more French speakers than Spanish speakers, for instance. I also think that makes it, okay, I'm going to say something a little controversial, but I think that there's a reason why so many Americans only know English, and it's because the vast majority of Americans only really come across English. Even here in LA, where there's obviously a lot of Spanish influence, there's places like Florida, even New York where there's a lot of Spanish influence, you're never really required to know another language. Like, even though there is so much Spanish influence, you don't need to know it in your everyday. Whereas versus Europe, you will come across people that only can speak their native tongue, and it's a bit more like, yes, English is a very popular second language in Europe, but you'd be surprised at how often I was surprised at how often I came across people that didn't know English or did not want to speak English. Of course, it's more likely in non-touristy areas. Like, yeah, you will come across English speakers in like Paris, for instance, but once you leave the touristy areas, like, you are not going to you're going to run into people that only know their native tongue. So there is a little bit of unfair advantage, I feel, where like Europeans know more languages because you're surrounded by a lot more languages, and you have the opportunity a lot more times to experience other language and experience people that only can speak that language. So I think that is an interesting aspect. And I'm focusing mainly on Europe, but you can really say this about a lot of the globe. The Americas, both continents, are pretty isolated, but Africa, Europe, Asia are the big ones where you will come across a lot more. So there's those aspects. Not to get in conspiracy territory, but I don't think that the education system necessarily wants to teach us all that much about history or all that much about geography. Just coming from like if you think about it, if I'm like the U.S., if I'm like somebody that's like controlling the U.S., or even if I'm just somebody that wants to control tourism alone, I don't want necessarily a bunch of Americans to go to another country and give their money away. I want like a New Yorker to just take a flight down to Florida and spend your money there. It's overall coming to the same place. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just financially, there's a pretty big incentive to keeping Americans inside of America, or keeping Americans, for instance, afraid of Mexico. Throughout my travels through Mexico, I couldn't help but feel that there's really a lot of the media pounds how scary Mexico is in Americans' minds. And that's not necessarily the case when you actually go there. yourself. You kind of that veil gets opened pretty quickly, and you realize, oh, this is just a regular place. You know, you have to be careful in certain spots. Other spots are really, really nice. So I think there is an incentive to not teach Americans too much about other people's history and not teach Americans too much about the rest of the world. Whether it's a financial, I mean, I'm just really talking about a financial incentive. I think that that's a big aspect of it. And it's just kind of, it's a little bit annoying. Obviously, I'm a history guy, but it is a little bit annoying because, not to say that like math and sciences, those are really important. Those are very, very, very important. But I wish that there was a different, like, I'm not a math guy. I'm glad that I was taught math, but man, do I remember anything from those math classes? Not really. Why was you need to teach kids math. I'm not advocating to not teach kids math, but did I need to be hammered math every single year for 13 years, kindergarten through 12th grade? I actually wasn't. I stopped taking math I think my senior year finally, but that's still a lot of math. Like, what if I'm not, I mean, but outside, from my perspective, and everyone's going to have a different perspective because it depends on your career choice, but math has been very useful for me. I like math now, but outside of, like, you know, plus, minus, multiplication, division, there's not a whole lot of other math I'm really doing. And I have to work with numbers as like a creator of content all the time. But so, like, pretty basic math is, I think, the bar that you don't, you know, as long as you teach everyone that, that's, but, like, man, some of this stuff that I had to be taught, like, why was I taught geometry? See, I don't have a problem if you, like, chose that path, but it was required in my school that you had to take geometry. So I guess it's difficult because kids don't know what path they're going to choose in life. It's kind of hard to make them make that choice when they're in high school or middle school or something like that. But it's a little bit annoying that they left out, I feel, so many subjects that I talk about every single day in my videos that I feel like could make a real world impact on people. That if people understood more about the subjects that I teach, I feel like in my videos, they would have a much better understanding of how the world is working. Or even like how just, man, I'm getting off into a tangent, but just like even how like even your friends are working, or like, for instance, this is just random, but I have a couple of Vietnamese friends, and they know French. Like, they have French, they know some French words, and they have a lot of curiosity with French culture, and I find that fascinating because that really stems from when the French were over there colonizing Indochina. So there's a lot of crossover between French and Vietnamese, Cambodian, Laos. So when you meet those people in your real life, they will know certain French foods or certain French words. And little aspects like that, I love that. That's so cool. I'll throw another one in there. Right now, I have been on a learning Spanish journey for the last like 2 years. I've always taken Spanish. I took Spanish in high school. I have been really pushing myself to become fluid and fluent in Spanish. So we're going pretty hard into this. And I take a class every Wednesday where I actually go into a Spanish class and I learn, like, actually in a classroom setting. I'm not just teaching myself. And one thing I'm really loving learning about when it comes to learning about Spanish is the origins of Arabic words. And that comes down to geography. There's a lot of Arabic inside of Spanish, and that goes over so many people's heads. But if you knew just basic geography, that Spain is right next to Morocco, and basic history, the Reconquista, the Islamic empires that took over the Iberian Peninsula and then they slowly got taken out, if you knew that, you'd understand, like, oh, this is why there's a bunch of Arabic words or Arabic sounding words in the Spanish language. For instance, I was just learning about ojalá. Ojalá in Spanish means like I wish or I hope. And that is an Arabic word. You can kind of hear it, ojalá, kind of meaning like God willing, in that sort of zone. There's a bunch of Spanish words like alfombra, carpet. I think I'm saying that right. Again, I'm not ready yet. Alberca. Alberca is pool in Spanish. There's a bunch of words in the Spanish language that starts with al, and al means the in Arabic. And it's like, if people knew more about geography and history, you'd be able to put those connections together. And I just think that, and those are just two random examples I can think of just off the top of my head, but you just start figuring out way more stuff, and you start digging a little bit deeper on why things the way they are. You know, you start to be able to see why things work the way they are, how the world and how the cogs are turning around, how the cogs are turning, I guess I should say. So I hope that in the future, we start maybe changing our mind here a little bit when it comes to, well, I hope that we start upgrading our curriculums. I'm having to say that word again, especially because the world is becoming smaller and smaller. Every year that goes by, the world is becoming smaller and smaller. We're more and more connected. We're more and more online. It's easier to travel more than ever. A lot of people are doing it now because a lot of people are working remotely. The world is becoming more and more connected. I think the U.S. has got to do a better job, educational-wise, about teaching people about maps and flags and history, because we can't keep doing the isolationist stuff, because we can't keep just hammering our own stuff home. And I think we'd be a lot better off. We'd be a lot less ignorant if we were doing this. Clearly, we have a ways to go. But anyways, that was just my rant, because it bothers me all the time. I talk about this all the time, and it just bothers me that it's funny, because even my YouTube channel, believe it or not, like, I've got really low rates of U.S. viewers, American viewers, compared to other YouTube channels out there. We're talking less than 40%. I think it's like the lowest I ever got is 37%. That's pretty low. That's pretty low rates of American viewers, and it's my channel is so heavily, a lot, like the vast majority of my channel are international audiences, which is crazy because I speak English. So in order to watch my videos, you have to be an English speaker. The U.S. has the most English speakers. You would think that there would be a little bit more. So people internationally that are watching me, those more than likely, not all the time, not if you're coming from Australia or Ireland or the British, but they're watching me because English is their second language. So that's an even smaller factor. So when I travel, it's funny, I'm recognized way more often when I'm traveling than when I'm here in the U.S. I am recognized sometimes in public, but it's a rare thing. But when I go to Europe, it's really crazy. I forget what it's like. I was in Europe for 3 months last year, and I was recognized every week. Whereas, like, here, I go outside, and I just want to say, like, I don't necessarily, like, I feel very uncomfortable when I'm in those situations. I don't want to be recognized. I feel like I do a good enough job of, when I am, of like, oh, let me learn about this person. But I'm always, like, the first couple seconds kind of taken back. I'm like, oh, crap, like, this person recognizes me. This is so weird. Because I'm so not used to it here in the U.S. Like, it happens maybe once or twice every 6 months. I feel like those are pretty good rates. The last time it happened was like 3 months ago here in the U.S. But like I said, in Europe, it was happening like every single week. So yeah, even my content itself clearly shows that there needs to be some more work done here in the U.S. about these subjects. But anyways, hope you enjoyed this rant. Thanks for watching.